sure that the folks on those teams have assignments to these requests where they can actually vet the request properly.
Yeah.
Also limiting your end user population to standards. So we've been able to work with Staples and vendors, sort of like Staples Office Max, those types of folks that provide daily supplies, and integrate that into a system where they can go in and get particular day-to-day items, and not necessarily a $7 pack of Uniball, like the really nice pens. I mean, you can still have pens, but not the $8 pack, right? So we can limit the standards. We have an approved list, and then once that request is made, the approval process gets kicked to the manager, and then the proper chain, of approvals follows suit. So there's checks and balances, but we're also making sure that we know what's out there, and what's being purchased, why and when, and for who. I think the last part of that, it really just from one that kind of gets overlooked is asset retirement. So it's great to be able to have a streamlined way to procure a new asset, whether it's a monitor or a computer or keyboard, mouse, whatever the case may be. But we need to make sure that when an asset, especially something that could potentially retain PHI, is retired, that the chain of custody from the department or the end user is recorded all the way from being picked up in that unit, and then going on the back of the truck to the e-cycling company where it's being sent to destroy or be destroyed. So having all those records has always been a very manual process. Somebody will have a spreadsheet that has to get uploaded into this system. And if it's not done timely enough, then your records are outdated. So a central point to be able to manipulate and manage that data and keep it up to date is crucial.
Yeah. So Selena, just thinking about, Mike mentioned spreadsheets. So Mike, the process to extract that spreadsheet out of, like an ITSM tool, and then manually track it. You guys just inherently, if you think about taking that data and bringing it into teams from a collaboration perspective. So Selena, I automatically go to the lists functionality that Teams now has. So you guys, can we take this even a step further when we think about device and asset management to incorporate lists, help to keep that updated and then feed that back into your ITSM platform, right? I mean, Selena, what do you think? Because you know lists pretty well. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, lists, you can actually take that functionality, use it. It's very easy to use. It's just like an Excel sheet pretty much. You can have it out there, and then on the back end, you can put a flow and have it feed it back into the ITSM. So, depending on what type of ITSM that you're using, you can use the API capability to feed it back in and have a two-way sync.
Cool. And so the other thing that I think about is that, Mike, if you think about our approval process, just, internally when we go back and forth with devices, it keeps me in one platform. So I never want to replace my ITSM tool, but I kind of want to augment the flow and reduce the number of applications that I'm going between in the course of the day. So, to your point, Selena, incorporating that two-way feed through the API, that's pretty slick, right? I mean, it keeps you in one platform.
Right.
Yeah, and keeps you tracking through the course of the day. That's pretty slick.
And to add on to that, I mean, you could also utilize forms and stuff, since, Teams does sit on top of SharePoint. You could utilize forms and have a form on the back end where it's actually syncing both ways. So, you're feeding Teams with that form and stuff. So when you have a new asset that actually comes in, somebody's actually putting in that request.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then that gets back to the approval process too. So like if the approval is generated in that process, automate job kicks out, it can actually write to the ITSM tool and create the ticket to actually go ahead and pull that from the warehouse and get it configured for the user and appropriately route it to the correct desktop team.
Yeah. So, that's what I have another perspective I kind of want to talk about with this. What about just being able, if you take that list and you're talking about asset management deployment and you've got teams who, of your technical teams who are out there in the field deploying the devices, just the immediacy of being able to update, to understand, the volume of work that's left. Mike, I think, and Selena and Jose, all of you, we've been in these very large systems and organizations where, you've got 100 devices to deploy for the day. It has to get done. So being able to know where everybody's at more immediately and seeing actually the progress tracked in a list versus, maybe having to go out and search, an ITSM in the ITSM, or even, if there's a spreadsheet going back and forth in an email. So I think even from a deployment perspective, the collaboration that can occur amongst these larger deployment teams could also be very beneficial with that, the two-way interaction as well. What do you guys think about that perspective?
Yeah, so you're always on the hunt for that 1, 2, 5, 10 machines, right, that you can't find. But I think Mike can probably vouch for this as well. Sometimes you go from hunting down the machine to hunting down the user, and then the user has to tell you where that machine went, and was there a swap, or someone new joined the department and they got a new device, and that device kind of got handed down, or whatever the case may be. But so having that single pane of glass, I think, helps. But asset management is key in that regard, because you can literally map out the logistics of a deployment. So deploying to a smaller organization of 250 users is not, or devices, that's not a big deal, right? But 35,000 user or and device organization, now you'll have some problems if you can't find the assets, right? And then you can't immediately just deploy, right? And then if that asset has changed departments for some reason, you may be deploying an image or something to that PC that no longer is needed, right, in the new department where it landed. So it's like a jungle sometimes.
And I think that the immediacy of being able to update, to your point, remember some of those Win 7 to 10 deployments we did, Jose, having to go out and figure out, where is this device? It says it should be right here.
I just got over that, so
you did.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah. No, but it's tough, right? Because we can push out, 100 or 200 images at once. But if you can't find, if your data is bad, then we'll be scratching our heads for 2 days trying to figure out what happened to the next 200 devices.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. All right, it's great. And, and again, I go back to the API being able to connect the two systems and have that, immediate update. There's no lag in the update of the ITSM tool to the location, and really, listing out the asset as a whole. Jose, to your point, location, and really just it allows that one point of entry from the procurement process through asset delivery.
Yeah, so you also have budgetary reasons, right? So, let's set up this workflow because we don't want anyone just ordering whatever device that they want. And if there is a special case, then let it go through the proper channels, and then they will vet certain models depending on what the requirements are, right? And that's the other part, right? So, due to COVID, there were a lot of companies out there that were just rushing to get PCs, and there wasn't enough supply to meet the demand. People were literally walking into Walmart and going out to Best Buy and different places to just get consumer grade laptops. But imagine the nightmare that can create, right? Well, now you have an extra 100, 200, let's say devices out there that may not have the proper TPM or TPM at all, right? So now we can't encrypt these devices. So what do we end up doing with these devices? We have devices that possibly won't work, or there could be times that I've encountered where there's a specific piece of hardware on a laptop that will not resolve in terms of drivers, right? Or it causes some sort of issue. So what we do is we tell Dell we don't want that laptop. We tell HP, hey, let's try a different model, because there's a lot of testing that happens in the background to make the hardware compatible with the software so that it can, work in the environment for the end user.
Yeah, very, very valid points. All right, anything else that you guys can think of from asset management?
I think Mike was going to say something.
Yeah, Mike, what's up?
Yeah, I just think so. Obviously, in healthcare, having to be dynamic and having to shift resources, especially with COVID. We've talked about this quite a bit through some of our most recent webinars, but a respiratory unit, I guess it's probably not a great example, but a unit that was used maybe to treat minor injuries, and I'm just throwing hypotheticals out, that's underutilized, that needs to be turned into a respiratory unit. Once those assets move to support the workload, it's important that those assets are identified in the asset management system as being moved to that location, so that way we know how to track them and where they are, and we're not, again, to Jose's point, having bad data, spinning our wheels looking for a device in 2 West that's now been moved to respiratory to support an influx of COVID patients. So making sure that data is up to date in real time is key, especially with the culture of security today. We need to know where things are.
Yeah.
And as up to date as possible, right? Because I've seen where in the crunch, we needed, 25 or another 50 PCs, and someone says, hey, there's a cart full of PCs right there, right? And no one's there available to make changes in the system. However, there's someone there like Mike with a clipboard and is copying down all the tag numbers, right? So they can go back in later into the system and make the changes.
Yeah, and so that real-time integration, that two-way feed through that API, and being able to do that, even think about mobile devices, you guys, have this, being able to take it to more of that mobile approach, and track that asset move in real time in a singular platform, having it integrate so that, both, that asset management system is up to date, and you can track each and every one of those devices is really important.
So I'm glad you brought that up, just to kind of end cap this this portion or this slide. You think of like the mobile devices, right? The cellular devices. Those are probably tracked a lot better and more closely than your laptops, right?
Yeah.
Or other devices. But it should be the idea of that, you don't want something so strict that it becomes an encumbrance, or it hinders the user from being able to get the device that they need or transfer from devices. But however, with cellular devices, it usually doesn't get passed from one person to another without it going back to the department, right? And then they either wipe the phone or whatever the case may be, and then they reallocate it to another user. Right. So it's that idea of things, but having a tool, being able to jump into Teams and immediately make those changes almost on the fly. I wouldn't be surprised if we can expand, based on the API capabilities, and have like a certain scan function, that would work with Teams. Now, of course, this is probably future state, but I could see it heading in that direction to make it easier. So throughout time, I think asset management, regardless of the technology, how has it advanced, is key to managing these devices.
Yeah, and I think we all can agree that there was a time this spring where it was difficult to get devices. So the device management and knowing where things are and being able to repurpose and move as required, and having the real time data available for, even look at audits. You want to go through it and audit your devices and understand, what you have in assets. You're getting real-time tracking by integrating the two systems together, because we can do everything real time. So, I
know we're about a third of the way done here with, I just wanted to throw, and we didn't touch on this too much, but it was one of the things that I know we've experimented with and done some integrations with, and I know it would have changed my life drastically maybe 10 years ago, but a lot of these tickets would come into the help desk. I need a computer. Okay, great. What kind of computer? Is it a laptop? Is it a business grade laptop? Are you a developer? Or are you an engineer? What's your role? So providing that list, almost like an online shopping experience when you go to interface with the procurement aspect of ServiceNow or whatever your ITSM is through Teams. It's truly like an online shopping experience. Not only the only assets you're going to see are the ones that have been identified and approved by your organization. But you can kind of pick the build that you think you need for your role. It needs to be approved, but it does give the folks on the other end a little bit more information and a lot less investigative work on the back end to say, okay, well, this is an I5 blah, blah, blah build for accounting. looks like it's been approved, so we're going to pull that from the warehouse and start configuring. So it makes everyone's lives a little easier, and it alleviates the back and forth between the manager, the end user, and then the technical team. And then ultimately the folks pulling it from the warehouse or wherever that procurement centralized location is. So I just think that, to me, is one of the cooler pieces of the integration for procurement process.
Yeah,
And you base that per role, right? So that's
Yeah.
a new technician doesn't order a 64 gig rig, right?
Yeah, and Mike, to think about how to further adapt and expand upon that, there's use cases here for AI, and building in some AI into teams to integrate with ITSM, so that when I order a laptop or I need a laptop, the AI guides me through that online shopping experience, so that my ITSM tool ultimately has exactly what the warehouse is going to need to be able to pull, and they can also see the approval along the way, by integrating the workflows into that. So I think if you think advanced capabilities around the integration pieces, an opportunity for expansion and further workflow efficiency, integrating some of that AI that's available out there now would be pretty cool too. Yeah. All right, so I think we could probably do a whole webinar just on asset management. What do you guys think? I think we've hit a hot topic for this group.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. All right, let's move on to the next slide, Jose. Let's see what we've got up next. Oh boy, this is near and dear to Selena's heart. Change management.
Yes, I'm big on change and processes, as you know. So
yeah, so how does integrating ITSM change processes into teams streamline workflows? What can we drive to, and we look at Jose, this one will also be of interest probably to you, streamlining of patching or software updates, getting not only the production changes, which, getting your cab to approve, but what about just purchasing approvals, and really leveraging and, an integration between the request system and teams, and reducing the number of clicks and the number of applications you have to go to for approval processes. So let's talk about how we can, drive workflows, reduce manual approval times. And then, I know, Selena, we've talked about this, templates, and in relation to delegation of issue and change management. So what do you guys think? What are your thoughts about ways to use the ITSM Teams integration to drive change management?
It reminds me of a project that I was on. So I think of project work, right? So one of the things that when I go into a new project, I ask questions around, so what is your change management process, right? Do you have any monthly freezes, right? Because sometimes there's changes, right, where we need to make last minute changes for hardening standards, right, to an image where group policy has to change. But then because there's certain effects to the machine or somewhere in the process, we end up having to put in a change. You may have to go through several layers of approval, and then depending on when it is. And I used to always, and I learned this after my first big project where I was doubling as project manager, where I would stay away from any changes near that monthly freeze, because you're talking about maybe 7 business days, right? Yep. So, and then if for any reason, let's suppose we're supposed to begin deploying, then it kind of holds things up. Now we can go from green to yellow on the project, right? But it's that process. So, and I think that for me, that's when you say change management, that's one of the first things I get into when it comes to starting a new project and interviewing the sponsors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say one of the biggest things is, like, for example, you can utilize forms and stuff, and have a form for that CAB meeting. So before you even go into that CAB meeting, you actually have that form created, anything that needs to occur. And then you can also have the teams, templates on the back end. So as you're going through that process, then, it'll go also through a workflow. That workflow will actually have all the approvals needed before the actual CAB meeting. So once you get into a CAB meeting, then it's just the final decision stating that, okay, do we want to proceed with this change? And then what is the backout plan if we need to have a backout plan for that change? So I believe that, processes, when it comes to change management, you have to have the processes in place in order for it to be effective.
One thing that I just thought of is when there's an emergency change to production, with the integration of the tool and Teams, you're probably going to get alerted within Teams that there's an urgent change. And I know a lot of times, and all of you have been, on the receiving end of my questions when it comes to why the urgency, how many end users are being impacted, what are the types of, so sometimes information that might need to have a conversation or further, really understanding before it's approved. Again, because you're already in a collaboration tool, think about, I think anyways, about the fact that I don't have to pick up the phone and call you. I can either initiate a chat or initiate a group call and, look at not only the change that's in front of me within Teams, but then, further document and, collaborate and, even have you guys show me what the impact is going to be. So, I mean, what about just the streamline of the reduced number of additional clicks outside of the ITSM tool that you're now reducing just by being able to spin those conversations up in Teams? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely important because, for example, and I know, Emily, we've ran into this a few times, like, for example, if let's say, you say, Selena, I need to understand the impact to this and I need to know exactly, how it's going to affect all these users. I can actually just click, meet now and get everybody on a call really quick and show you exactly, how it's going to impact us. And even from an ITSM standpoint, we can see everything within Teams to be able to utilize and make that decision of what needs to happen.
Yeah, so one of the best approaches for documentation when it comes to making changes in technology or let's say for a project, technology project that I found is where we get to, let's say we're discussing Windows 10 and all the different features and so on and so forth. So then there's certain areas that you need decisions, right, to be made by the sponsor. You educate them as much as you possibly can. The stakeholders get together and then they give you feedback and then a decision is made, right? So then you have what the default setting is and then what the setting was decided, right? And then the justification for it, right? And then any possible impacts, right? If there is any. But to me, that rationale, right, should be able to probably be attached to many things that we do, especially in technology, right? But I think that it would help out because, the department, the organization is going to outlive us, right? We may move on to greener pastures or retire or whatever the case may be, but the next company coming in, right? Or if we're doing a project, someone comes in behind us and they can decipher, right, what it is that was done and why. What was the rationale? I've asked that question many times. Hey, so I noticed that this is set like this. Do you know why? That I don't know. I wasn't here during that time, or that person is no longer here who was in charge of it. I know, Mike, you can vouch. You've seen that many times over, right? So I just think that that whole rationale, that whole approach should go into the change management process just across the board. And it's, in terms of collaboration, I mean, Emily, you remember that we were on threads. We're nearing the 50th email thread. And Emily said, okay, look, time out, guys. It's time to jump on a call. Okay. Yeah. There's too many people, too many things going back and forth. And we internally had to kind of come to a consensus of what's the approach going to be to this one issue, right? And email at this point isn't effective anymore, right? Getting on a call is, but with Teams, it makes it that much easier. And then it being the single pane of glass that we keep mentioning, to be able to see the changes, manage the changes, or make changes, that's ideal. I mean, we're talking about being able to be more efficient, do a lot more work, handle a lot more data, a lot quicker and easier.
Yeah. And I think also, if I think about just where we are and the times, we're not, walking down the hallways anymore to talk about the change that was just entered into the ITSM tool, right? We're not able to go have a desk side conversation with individuals to understand, some of those additional, items that we might need to know before we approve a change. So I think having the access to the change request in front of you and be in that same system while also talking to the person, on a meeting or a chat, and being able to have, Jose, to your point, that single pane of glass, it's a singular lens. It really just, I think, drives down the number of applications I'm switching between. It helps really drive my efficiency, because I can do everything, kind of in the one application. I think that's really important, especially right now and where we are.
Yeah, speaking of so in the change management, right, going back to project work, I've been in situations where we needed a change made. We finally got the approval. The resource that makes that change is not at the same location, is in a different time zone. They're literally trying to reach him by house phone, right? To wake him up to make changes. But being connected, let's say, in teams, it just allows us for a lot of flow of communication, ideas, even, back and forth. I can quickly, ping Mike or Selena, hey, listen, I'm working on this type of issue with this client. I'm thinking of, taking this approach. What do you think? And then we can easily, they can easily just chat back, or we jump on a quick call and just, just go from there. I mean, I've gotten calls at the end of the day from, different internal resources, and it's like, today was an interesting day, and we kind of like had a wind down conversation, and I don't know, for me, it kind of brings the team a little closer. Is the feel that and the sentiment I get. I don't know about anybody else, but again, to me, it's just a flow. Is that you begin the day with teams and you end the day with teams. Once teams is closed out, then your day's done.
No,
Yeah.
honestly, mine never closes out, because then I'm actually on the mobile app. So.
Set the do not disturb.
And Mike, did you want to hop in and say something?
Yeah, I think to caveat onto what Jose said, I think it's important not only for internal communication, but for your vendors as well. So there's so much overlap and interdisciplinary, IT or not necessarily silos, but let's say, you've got a change that may affect cardiology packs in one way that doesn't radiology or lab or, whatever that discipline is. And for everybody to be able to be aware of that change prior to it coming, and having that automated, alert and the ability to kind of see what we're looking to do in the environment, and to be able to voice their concerns or whatever risks it may present in a streamlined, easy, effective way, I think helps tremendously. I can't tell you how many times we've had to roll back a change 0 hour because one particular ActiveX functionality they wanted to push out to all users would break radiologist's ability to look at radiographs via Internet Explorer on some remote, patient room or something. I'm just, but it does happen, and happens quite a bit. So being able to be connected not only internally but with your vendors that you have close relationships with helps you be even that much more successful.
And that's big. Thanks, Mike. I forgot all about that. So there's been several times, right? We're in the habit of creating, when we're on a project, we create a Teams workspace internally, and then we create a public-facing Teams workspace, right? So sometimes now that we are in the era of not only do we just come in, or can we come in and make the changes and do the work, but we also kind of educate local IT expertise, right? And there's times where we're just, in a position or role of leadership and guidance, where we educate, walk them through it. We may not be necessarily making the changes. So sometimes that Teams workspace that is shared with the client is the only thread that we have, right, to communicate. So if we need certain things to be done, we can supply certain information, we can have meetings on it, request the changes, and then when the changes are made, they can respond, and then we kind of keep everything there in one place, where now they have access to everything, right? And then once everything is said and done and finalized, they can retrieve the data that they need. But everything was worked on, decided on, and collaborated on via Teams, because sometimes we won't have access to their systems, right? Sometimes the client has certain security policies that don't allow for that, right? So that Teams workspace has been like our way in, and it's almost like working side by side with them.
Actually, Jose, you bring up a really good point. So as much as we would love always being able to access a client's ITSM tool, a lot of times there's security policies in place which prohibit, from a consulting perspective, being able to have access to those systems. So, it's nice to also be able to track and really, receive that information, even as an extract, and post that into Teams, because then you're still collaborating between the two systems. It looks a little bit different, but the information's still being shared and collaborated upon.
They can pick and choose what they give you access to if they choose to do so inside the Teams workspace, right?
Yeah.
With those connectors, application integration, or even APIs if they decide to put something together, right? But again, if they want you to only look at tickets that require some sort of support because of the rollout, right? Let's say Windows 10 or Exchange Online or whatever the case is, right? So now you can only see that, right? And assigned and maybe resolved or whatever it is, right? But it's much more controlled than just giving someone access to a system, because we're used as consultants, right? We go in, we get access, we look at all the areas that we need to get our information to help produce, let's say, a current state to the client, and then all the components that touches those areas, right? So, and that could be broad, right? But let's suppose, but if we take, let's say, a Zendesk or a Remedy or whatever it is, if we plug that into Teams and they can only see a specific category of support tickets or what have you, right? Then that's it. They can't see beyond that, and that's important, right? Because again, a vendor can come in and complain that they don't have access, but at the same time, if there's certain security and compliance regulations on the client side that need to be adhered to. So it just keeps everybody safe and in play.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so from a change management perspective, great conversation. Again, I think we could probably have this be a singular topic, but it's the two systems working together to provide a single lens, that pane of glass that allows you to see what's out in the environment, add some additional workflows and notifications that allow you to work more effectively and efficiently together as a team. Great. All right, let's move on to that. Yeah, let's move on to that next topic. Oh, this is one of my favorite topics. IT help desk ticketing. We get a lot of calls, you guys. We get, fun fact, it's, hundreds of calls even internally on a monthly basis. Now think about full scale. Wouldn't it be nice to reduce help desk calls by being able to connect that API? So Selena, we'll go back to that API perspective, and really you can have a help desk ticket generate right from the workspace that you're in. So definitely the ticket creation process. After we have that call or that discussion, you guys, I really want to talk then about the leadership perspective and the aging reports, being able to collaborate to make sure you're supporting your business units by having dashboards, delivered right within TeamSpace. But let's talk about ticket creation from Teams and how that, streamlines processes and lowers support calls. What's your perspective? You all help out internally with our ticketing systems. We're definitely implementing the integration of ITSM with Teams, and ticket creation is a large part of what we're doing for our client partners. So, what do you think one of those benefits are? Talk to me about what you see this as an opportunity.
I just want to say that at this point, it's a must-have, right? Yeah. Because that's a way of being able to, I mean, let's be honest, right? So over the years, IT support desk has been running thin, right, and thinner and thinner, right, as time progresses. Now the advanced technology should really help that, but at the same time, I've seen 3, 4, 5 help desk staff just overwhelmed, that they're on the phone constantly and trying to resolve certain issues, and it puts a lot of the burden on them. And I think if that burden can be shared some, right? So having a knowledge base, having, virtualizing a few things, going in through Teams, and you have help, you need help with a certain topic, maybe it can give you an article or an internal knowledge base before ever connecting you to a support technician. And that could alleviate the amount of calls and the stress on the support desk, right? Especially in times when you're doing an Exchange Online upgrade or a Windows 10 upgrade, where now we either need to have, hire or leverage, more support desk resources, or they're going to be, again, stress taking in a lot of calls.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would say one of the biggest things when it does come to, help desk and stuff like that is, utilizing like, Tobias or something like that, that has, artificial intelligence that, if you're doing an integration with, ServiceNow or Zendesk or anything like that, you're reducing the overhead of, resources where, you have the artificial intelligence that's actually responding back to some of those questions, that people are asking. Let's just say, for example, how do I connect my printer? It'll respond back to them rather than them actually, creating a ticket for, how do I connect my printer? If it's something that, the artificial intelligence isn't able to help with, then at that point in time, it'll give them the option to create a help desk ticket. But, you don't have the overhead of resources or employees, getting phone calls constantly. Once that ticket's actually created, then at that point in time, you can actually see reports, as well as from a leadership standpoint, as well as, if the agents and stuff like that need to do a meet now, or, I know there's been a few times that, somebody would create a question for Power BI or SharePoint, and I would respond back, or I would fix the issue, and then I would respond back to them just via chat, making sure that they've been able to access it and that it's working correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good point. So when I go back to the days that I was working a support desk, I remember when and if we had a chat functionality, I was able to chat with multiple users at once, right? Because depending on what the flow of conversation is or was, right, you can manage that. And sometimes you're working on one thing with a user, and they're essentially on hold. You're working remotely, and you can chat with another. So if we just kind of scale it back, let's not go as far as the AI, which, believe me, I think that we should. It should come inside the box, right? But for those that don't have that, creating some sort of flow and framework inside of Teams where you leverage that, right, in your support desk, being able to chat, like Selena said, fix the issue, go back and chat one-on-one with what was done, and then, how it was resolved, and what to look for next time. Sometimes it's a matter of, also educating the user, because I think that with technology and the fact that people are using more technology at home, I think that users, we have a different breed of users nowadays than we did 20 years ago, right? So I think that, again, as long as it's within their administrative or non-administrative permissions to make certain changes, if they can, I think a lot of users will make changes themselves or fix the issue next time, right? Even if it means going over and kicking the printer. Please don't kick the printer, but yeah.
So the other thing is, we talk about self-service mode. What about proactive communication? So let's say that there's an application that goes down in the environment. It's not always easy just using ITSM to broadly communicate outward that there's an issue. Teams has that functionality where, if there's a certain issue that's been resolved, we can proactively send out communication to one OU or group within the organization to actually get ahead of those help desk calls that you know are going to come in. To your point, Selena, then there's almost when you think about integrating AI into this workflow, think about, whenever there's an application outage, how many calls do you get into the support center? So, if you can quickly update your AI to be able to respond to, yes, there is an issue in the environment, we're working on it, check back regularly for updates, you're proactively reducing the incoming call volumes that you might experience otherwise.
Yeah, same thing happens with the power company, right? Now, if there's an outage, the lights may flicker or they may go out, power may go out, and then literally 2 minutes after, the energy company is sending me an email. Hey, this is the situation. We plan on working on this and so on and so forth. Then we'll have you guys back up by X amount or X time, right? And then if that time is going to be prolonged or whatever it is, they'll send follow up email. So now my question around that is, say Mike and Selena, so that we've done user training in terms of a project, right? So do you think end users will become desensitized to those sorts of notification emails?
That's a good question.
I mean, from the email standpoint, I don't think so, because when it comes through on Teams, because when the actual response, so if we're being proactive and an actual response comes through on Teams, it's going to have that kind of that topic that so-and-so reached out to you about, this issue. So I don't think so, and as long as it's not, I would say as long as it's not a lot of them. I mean, if we're having every single update that we're doing go out to members, then yeah, I would say then it would get, people wouldn't pay attention to it. But otherwise, I think it's fine.
I think it depends on how it's implemented. I mean, we live in a kind of a self-service society now anyway. I mean, think about when you have a package on the way from Amazon, how many times have you tracked that thing before it finally gets to your house? And it's only it's 2-day delivery, and we're tracking stuff. As long as you're not getting hammered, to Selena's point, with, hey, we've acknowledged your ticket. Hey, we've assigned an engineer. Hey, we've finally opened a knowledge base. I mean, we don't want to kill them with white noise. But I think a more self-service approach would be much more adoptable in this day and age. And I wanted to go back to some of the, I guess, data entry of the ticketing, and kind of segues out of this a little bit. But so as your users, again, to self-service, they're putting their tickets in themselves. They're avoiding the hold times, which again raises frustration levels to another degree. And then the ticket's a little bit more urgent than it was when they first called, right? But you're allowing your help desk agents to actually research the issues as they come in. And they don't have that time constraint on the phone where they're holding the phone. They're trying to capture as much information as they can and get it logged into the system. And really at that point, what they're doing is data entry. So I guess a side effect of that doesn't really get talked about too much is it's talent retention, but you're growing your staff. You're preparing those staffs to grow internally within your company, because they're getting the exposure to some of the common issues that you have. They're meeting and getting to know your end user population, and they're able to solve those issues as opposed to just logging a ticket, doing data entry, and passing it to the next guy. So I think that's another great outcome of the self-service type model.
And it's not going to reduce your help desk calls to zero, right? But just think about it, right? In a 1,000 user organization, if the help desk calls are reduced by 20%, right? That's 200 less phone calls, right? So imagine 10,000 or 35,000 and 50,000. And again, I'm not saying let's reduce the support desk, but at the same time, now you can leverage them across other tasks and activities, right? So that you guys can become a little bit more efficient, right? As IT as a whole. So again, I just think it's almost, to me, a must-have. And I know it's just like there might be a knowledge gap there, right? But I mean, even in the simplest form, I've seen a lot of us create a workspace and then add a group of people to that workspace, and then that becomes the hub, right, for the collaboration for that particular purpose.
Yeah. And we're running tight on time, but just, one thing that we've also integrated are leadership reports. So if you think about that help desk perspective, looking at the aging report to understand, what's been sitting in your queue, 15, 30, 60, 90 days, whatever the ticketing average, that you want to see. It's nice because it's delivered in one place, so if I do not have to go out and worry about whether or not I need to pull an updated report in, from ServiceNow, I can log into Teams. I get that information fed in from, my ITSM tool and can act upon it. If I see that there's been an open issue for 15 days and I really want to dig into, what's taking so long, again, I can just chat quickly with the support agent who's attached to the ticket and understand a little bit more about why that takes it. So I think there's a true value in being able to have the dashboard report up and be able to collaborate and understand some of the aging and some of the ticketing, cues and why things are in the environment the way they are. So I just think that's a really important functionality because I think it drives communication amongst a cross-functional team to help drive resolution and get people support where they might need support.
And I can tell you as a manager, and this is a true story. It's kind of funny. In a previous life, I've managed multiple different IT teams that had different responsibilities, and I noticed through reporting that certain locations' response times were immaculate. They were closed within a couple of hours of the tickets being logged. Some just lagged and pushed the limits of the SLA, and I had to figure out what was going on. Well, one of the locations that had the stellar service, pharma was coming in and dropping off amazing lunches in the break room, and they were going and scooping up free lunches. So I was able to extrapolate that data from those reporting tools. But the other was some tickets were kind of lagging along and pushing SLA, and some of the medical carts on wheels had these 40-pound replaceable batteries that just were not that easy to replace. So I was able to identify those tickets that weren't the most fun to do, and incentivize the staff. Say, okay, hey, if you can get 5 of these done, this week, we'll talk about maybe letting you catch 30 minutes off, one Friday a month or something. Just some way to motivate folks to get after those tickets that were the least desirable. But it's nice to have that glance of what's going on in your teams. But yeah, literally the greatest response times on that one particular team were getting primo free lunches every day. So thought that was funny. I thought I'd share.
Did the reporting tell you what they were having for lunch?
It did not, but I'm sure it was pretty good if Pfizer was paying for it.
We can build that into the new workflows.
Absolutely.
All right, so we only have 3 minutes. So Jose, if you could go to the wrap up slide here. So just and we kind of talked about this. So some key takeaways, just some things that to think about from an implementation challenges perspective. There's no inherent ability to update records. So it's not really a challenge, it's an opportunity to additionally integrate using APIs, which are openly available in a lot of cases, and really, use what's available through the implementation and test and validate. Teams adoption. So Teams adoption I actually have in both advantages and challenges. If you're trying to drive the use of your ITSM tool in Teams and you've got a lower adoption, actually turning on that self-service modality like we talked about for support tickets and things of that nature, it actually helps to drive Teams adoption. You can then use that to really get the enterprise or your organization to really be able to use the full capacity of your collaboration tool that you have in the environment. You know, looking at ways to integrate AI, you know, it's really cool. Some of the chat functionalities that make you feel like you're really talking to an end user, and, you know, really be able to help drive self-service modality of issues, you know, through teams that update your ITSM all at the same time. You know, we had a great conversation about the asset management list and updating, you know, real time your ITSM right through that Teams interface, and really other ways to just automate process. There are so many clicks that everybody has on a daily basis. It'd be nice to bring in some of those automation features and functionalities that just really augment and support the ITSM tool, you know, but through the use of Teams. So I think there's some really cool advantages, and you know, obviously there's always some challenges that you face when you move to, you know, a different type of environment. But you know, it's looking at how all of these optimization advantages drive efficiencies and just help, you know, increase your productivity on a daily basis. So guys, I'm going to turn it over to see if you guys have any last minute comments. If there's any questions, if there's anything we did not get to in the Q&A, feel free to please add that into the chat. We'll happily follow back up with individuals that were in attendance today. So Jose, Selena, Mike, any last thoughts as we hit the 1 o'clock hour?
Well, we're at time, so I had fun discussing asset management, change management, and reporting.
Selena?
I agree. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Mike?
No, I'm good. Thanks, guys.
All right, and we thank you for your time. Jose, I think there might be one last final slide, not sure. Yep, questions, and thanks everybody for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time, and happy Wednesday. Thanks, team.
Happy Wednesday. Thanks.
Bye.